Hey, it's Joe. I got another question here. Well, Joe, what's the single biggest mistake you made as a real estate investor? Well, I guess I'll put it out on the line. I've talked about some of this stuff before, about my personal history and what I went through to learn this process, the failures that I had. Way back in I started investing back in 1986. And in that first few years, I built a business that was worth about $17 million. And I built it based on borrowing money on new construction. I was working in California. I was working up in the Hollywood Hills. I was building all kinds of beautiful houses. And everything was going really well. And I thought that I'd tied into something. I thought that I was, kind of the golden child, that I really, I was really good at this. But since I was borrowing money and I was also counting on appreciation of properties, that was my big mistake. What happened in 1990, 1991, the S&L crisis happened, and the market crashed, and the values of the properties that I had, and I was really heavily leveraged out there, the value of the properties that I had dropped by 30, 40% in California. And the banks came to me where I was getting my construction loans, and they said, you've got to put this much money into these deals, otherwise we're going to take these loans back. But I didn't have that money. I was too heavily leveraged into those properties, and I wasn't going to get that money until those properties were finished and sold. But the bank wouldn't wait for me because they were in trouble. So they took the properties back. I lost my entire business. I filed bankruptcy, and I was out of the deal. I moved back to Indianapolis and moved in with my parents. I'm 35 years old. We just had our first baby. It was 30 days old when my wife flew over from California back to move in with my folks. And I was grateful to have folks who loved me and would watch out for us. But it was the most humiliating thing that ever happened to me in my life. And I don't wish it on anybody. I know a lot of my students have sent me stories about their failures as well. I think that every investor goes through failures in their life, and especially when they think that they're invincible, which is where I was at the beginning. So I went back and I started to become a real estate agent, and I learned how to sell properties, and I became a top producing agent within within about a year. I was doing a lot of business, and I started making money again. I started to rebuild my credit, but I still didn't have enough money to invest, and I didn't have any credit to invest, and I couldn't go get a loan again, and I didn't want to get a loan anyway. So I figured out how to do this without cash. And the way that I did it was I would go out to a listing appointment as a real estate agent, and I would talk to some people that would have their property for sale. They wanted to sell it, but they had very little equity because the values hadn't gone up because of the crash that had happened. And I wanted to sell their property, and I wanted to make my commission on it, but they couldn't come to closing with money. And the only way I could have sold it for them is if they came to closing with cash when we finally sold it, because they'd lose money. So what I thought was, well, why don't we try this as a lease option? And so we did it as a lease option. We sold their property and gave them 3 years and got them their full price, and I took the lease option fee, and I made a profit. And then we also tried taking over the deed. Why don't you just deed me the property? I'll make payments on it. I'll put a tenant in there. I'll protect your credit, and I'll make a profit over the long term. And I started buying properties that way as well. And then we started doing some land contract stuff. And then I started learning how these zero down structures worked and which one which put me in the most control. Because I always wanted to be in control of the deals. I didn't want a bank to be in control. I didn't want somebody to come and take that property away from me, like happened to me in California. I didn't want to ever be in that situation again. And I didn't want to lose my money, and I couldn't, use my credit. Since then, not obviously, but my credit has improved dramatically. I've got perfect credit now. But I don't use it very often because I don't think that it's a good way to invest. I think it's too risky. Same with the cash. When I have cash, I usually buy properties for all cash rather than put down payments on them. So if I'm going to buy a property with any type of financing, it's going to be seller financing. That type of financing doesn't screw up your credit, and you can scale it up. You can do do as many of them as you can find properties. So the goal here is to find a lot of properties so that you can do this again and again on a consistent basis. So my big admonition to everybody is don't take out a loan, and at the beginning, don't even use your own cash. You know, they say you need money to make money, but I say if you can't make money with no money, you probably can't make money with money. So learn how to do it with no money first. Learn how to do it the bootstrap method, where you pull yourself up by your bootstraps using your brain, using structures that I teach to go out there and put these deals together, flip them, make some money, or keep them and put them in your portfolio. All right. Good luck to you.